Thanks for tuning in to the Drive On podcast, where we're focused on giving hope and strength to the entire military community. Whether you're a veteran, active duty, guard, reserve, or a family member, this podcast will share inspirational stories and resources that are useful to you. I'm your host, Scott DeLuzio, and now let's get on with the show. Hey everyone, welcome back to Drive On. I'm your host, Scott DeLuzio, and today my guest is Nick Padlo. Nick is an Army veteran and currently serves as the CEO of Sophros Recovery, a wellness center based in Tampa dedicated to the recovery and well-being of veterans and their families. Today, we'll be discussing Nick's journey, the benefit of wellness programs, and how Sophros Recovery is specifically helping those in the military community. Before we get into that, Nick, welcome to the show. Glad to have you here.
Thanks, Scott. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, uh, tell us a little bit about yourself, your experience in the military, and how it kind of helped guide you to what you're doing now.
Yeah, so I grew up in Jacksonville, Florida. Actually live in Jacksonville now. We've got a location here in Tampa. I grew up here. Went to West Point when I was 18. And was in the Army from 2003 to 2008. So I was in for 5 years, stationed in Hawaii with 25th Infantry Division. And we spent most of our time downrange, about 27 months between Afghanistan and Iraq. I look back on that time and I'm, super thankful for, the friends I made, the experiences I had, the leadership lessons, and, got out of the Army in 2008, went to business school. And, when I think about kind of, some of the challenges that I've had since, and we can get more into those, but I think, some of them were around kind of just trying to figure out who I was,
Mhm.
outside the Army, because for me and for a lot of people, I think those are such transformative years, in your life that you start to really identify with that. And, I kind of had a struggle redefining who I was, but the experience overall was great.
Yeah, and I I definitely agree with that. From all the people I've talked to on this show, a lot of times, uh, kind of just rediscovering who you are because your identity gets so intertwined with the military. No matter what branch you served in, you get known as I'm a soldier. That's
Right.
what it is, and um your whole identities kind of revolves around that until that gets kind of taken away. And I don't care if someone who just served for a few years or they did 20 plus years in the service. um I don't know, they do a great job at brainwashing us, I guess, to get that instilled in us. So no matter how long you served, it kind of becomes a part of your identity. Um, and then, like you were saying, then all of a sudden it's not. So who are you after that, right? So tell us about Sophros Recovery, and kind of where that came from, and the approaches that you guys use towards recovery and wellness and all that, and how it got started.
Yeah, so after I went to business school, I started a company out of Dallas, and the company was doing great. It was a rocket ship, and unfortunately, I was going just as fast in the opposite direction personally. And so, I found myself dealing with depression, with anxiety, with alcohol, with drugs. Really just trying to cope with these kind of feelings and sense of being lost and all the things that we were talking about earlier too. And, so I went to treatment in 2018. I went twice. I like to say I liked it so much I went back, but that's not exactly how it worked out. So I went to treatment a couple times. And after the second time I moved to Cambodia for 3 months, just lived at a temple there, practicing mindfulness and yoga. And, really wanted to come back to be able to start a business, as an entrepreneur who's gone through this experience. It's like, okay, how do I now find opportunity in that to build a business and help other people? And so
Mhm.
Softros was really started out of my own experience, as a way to kind of help people who were struggling with some of the same stuff that I had been struggling with. And that was really where we got started. And we got started in Jacksonville about 3 years ago. Fortunately we've had, a lot of great clients and our team's been wonderful. And so now we're open in Tampa as well.
Yeah, excellent. And it's great to see businesses, especially like yours, growing and expanding. And Not because it's great that there's a need for it, right? Obviously, we
Right.
I'd love to see you go out of business, and
Yeah,
not
me
in a
too. I'll
bad
find something else to do. If everybody gets
Exactly.
well, I'll find something else to do. No problem.
Exactly. But, there is obviously a need out there for,
Yeah.
recovery and, helping people get through this difficult time that they may be going through. So, you're expanding and obviously doing things right because otherwise people wouldn't be coming in the door, right? So, um, tell us a little bit about the approach that you take. It seems like just by looking at the website, kind of more of a holistic approach to recovery. Talk to us about kind of what you guys do and how it works.
I wish I could say that if you were struggling with mental health or addiction, that there was one thing that you could do
Mm,
that would help you. Right. I wish there was like one tool we could have. It's like, oh, if I got better at this, then I'd be healed. Right. And
yeah,
unfortunately, it's not like that. And so, I look at it as, how do we start to assemble what I call a recovery toolkit? Right. And it's this, you can kind of imagine, in life, you encounter these different things. Right. And some need one tool to fix and others need another tool. Right. You may need a hammer one day, you need a wrench another day, you may need something else. Right. And so, the things that we focus on, we do a lot of cognitive behavioral therapy, which is basically just a fancy way to say, hey, how do I recognize when my brain is lying to me and try to adjust it?
right.
Right. The other thing that we do is dialectical behavior therapy. And so I look at that as when I'm a 9 out of 10, my emotions, my cravings, when I'm just really upset, I need a set of tools that I can employ to put the fire out. I need a fire extinguisher today.
Mhm.
Right. And then mindfulness is a big part of what we do as well, which is how do we start to exist in the present moment without feeling like we need to escape? And for me, that's my daily practice, right? If I'm not doing that, I get in trouble. And so, what am I doing to do that maintenance on myself to keep myself up? We talked a lot about relationships and communication. How do we strengthen those relationships that are important in our lives? How do we have healthy relationships? I'm thankful like my significant other is in recovery too, right? And so, we support each other and it's super symbiotic and healthy, right? I encounter clients and friends who have an incredibly unhealthy life at home, right? Well, this is hard enough when everything else is supportive, right? It's,
Sure.
it's like almost impossible when everybody else has got my back. Well, when somebody doesn't have your back, then it becomes even harder, right? And so we also cover things like trauma and the individual experience as well. And so it's not about, hey, here's the solution, but it's let me start to build this toolkit. Let me give you different tools. Let me practice those tools, keep them sharp, whatever over analogy you want to use. But how do we keep all these things ready so that when we need them, when life gets lifey, that we've got a tool that we can pull out of our bag and be like, oh, this is the right tool for this. Let me use that rather than going back to my old behaviors.
Yeah, I like that, and because, I've actually used this same analogy that like a toolbox, with various things that you learn throughout your life. I mean, there's a whole host of skills. Everything from, way back when you learn how to tie your shoes and how to read and how to do basic math and things like that, and then move it on to the military when you learned how to, you know, shoot your weapons and do anything else that the military taught you. Those are all tools that you have, right? You learned how to keep your head on a swivel, looking for threats constantly, and you're looking you're overseas and you're looking for IEDs and other things like that could jump out and get you. Um, those are all tools. um, some tools you need to use on a daily basis. You need to learn how
Right.
to the reading and maybe math. You need to keep those tools with you on a daily basis. Um, as I'm driving to the grocery store, I really don't think I need to be scanning for IDs. That's not a tool
Right.
I need to be using,
Oh
right?
man. And it's funny you mentioned that. Like, I always use the example of, you always know the veterans in a restaurant because we're always sitting with our back to the wall. We
Yeah,
know where all the exits are. We know what everybody's wearing. But like the reality is, I'm at Applebee's and there's probably not a guy trying to kill me.
right.
And that uses so much brain power and energy and anxiety and hypervigilance. And like, we've got to let our brains reset, right? We got to figure out how to go back to normal where,
Mhm.
a trip to the grocery store, like you said, there's no IED on the way to the grocery store, most likely.
Right. But so, kind of continuing that analogy. So I think of it like, uh, like a contractor, someone who's building a house or something like that, where they bring the typical tools that they're going to use on a regular basis, their hammers, their drills, their screwdrivers, things like that that they're going to use frequently. They keep them on them in their tool belt, and so they walk around with that. But they got a whole crap load of other tools that are out in the
Mhm.
truck, in the
Yep.
box in the truck, right? And they're there if they need them, but they may only need them once in a while, every once in a while. They may not need them for a year, but they still have them just in case they need to go out and get it. And so I think of these a lot of these tools, like you're just talking about, like the veteran who's sitting in Applebee's, who's got his head on a swivel, his back to the wall. He knows where all the exits are. I'm not saying that any of that's a bad thing.
Correct.
Obviously, being aware of your surroundings, it's generally a good thing. You don't want to, just be sitting there oblivious to the fact that the place is getting robbed or something, like
Right.
when that happens. But you can turn that back on, just like the contractor, they can go back out to their truck and grab that tool. You can turn
That's a
that
great
back
analogy.
on when you need it, but you don't need to be constantly searching for threats every single second of the day all over the place. 4th of July is coming up. I know this episode's coming up um a month later or so after 4th of July, but as we're recording, we're just about at 4th of July. Fireworks are going to be going off. And we know this. We know that fireworks 4th of July equals fireworks. It's just going to happen. So you should probably be prepared for that and just know, hey, when I hear a big loud boom in the sky, chances are it's a firework. It's not somebody, you know, sending mortars to my house or, anything like that.
Yeah,
It's a
and if I
firework,
am if
right?
I am affected by it, what tools am I gonna use to get through
Yeah.
that night, right?
Yeah.
If I do have a reaction, say, my PTSD kicks in, like, what am I gonna do? Who do I have to call? Do I have a friend I can call? Do I
Mhm.
have, a relative? Do I have some breathing techniques? And what am I gonna do? Or am I just going into it with no plan and no tools, and I'm gonna freak out all night,
Exactly.
right? That
Yeah.
and I'm gonna go drink or whatever, right? We don't want to do that, so we gotta have a plan.
Yeah. Yeah, and to that point, that plan is, another tool that we've learned. We've learned how to make plans and kind of
Yeah,
prep for certain circumstances like that, and you can't prep for every, contingency, every circumstance, right? But, the mindfulness, the meditation, the things that you talked about earlier, kinda helps keep you in that present moment so you can be like, "Oh, yeah, that's just a firework," or you can
exactly.
have some other unexpected thing and you can react to it and be like, oh, it's not that big a deal. It was just, the garbage truck out front that made that loud noise or whatever. uh, okay, we're good. I don't need to low crawl to the door to figure it out.
Exactly.
so um so you guys do a lot of things that are kind of tailored probably more towards the unique needs of the individuals that are coming in. You got physical wellness, mental health type support. How do these programs work together, and how do they help individuals kind of the way in the way that you do it?
Yeah, so I look at it, we talked about kind of the different therapeutic modalities, right? And that's kind of all under our clinical side. So
Mhm.
within the clinical side, we've got group therapy, which is really important for veterans specifically, I think. So group therapy, the whole premise there is that you're not alone,
Yeah.
right? You think you're the only one that's ever experienced this. You
Right.
think you're a terrible, SOB, whatever you think about yourself, you start to see other people who are struggling with the same stuff and you're like, wow, he's not that bad and he's dealing with the same stuff. Right? So you start to relate. You start to have those interactions where you're like, okay, I'm not alone and I can see other people in the group who are getting through it. I can start to see people with like long-term sobriety and recovery and all that stuff that I want. And so I'm starting to like get that. You also have individual therapy, which is a little more tailored toward the needs of the individual. And that might be working through trauma or PTSD. It might be working on relationships, might be sobriety, whatever that is for this person. And then there's another leg that's our medical side. So we've got a medical director who's a doctor, we've got nurses. And the thought process there is, you know, if you have a table that has, four legs, right? And one side of it is your, mental health or whatever. Another side of it is going to be your physical health, right? If you're dealing with crippling depression that you can't fix, you may need something, and at least in the short term, you may need something, to medicate that so that you
Mhm.
can focus on developing these tools and skills. So we have our medical team there to support that side. And then, of course, we've also got case management, which is, another leg of the stool is, do I have a job? Do I have a house? Do I have transportation? Do I have these basic needs? Like, what can we do to start filling in that gaps? And we're not we don't run 7 nonprofits that have, all these different resources, but we know how to get you set up with them,
Mhm.
right? We know how to point you in the right direction to help you do the things that you need to do to be successful, right? Learn how to fish, so to speak. And then
Sure.
the final one, really the alumni program, which is just, for that next year, providing ongoing support.
And that's good that too, that you provide that ongoing support, so it's not like, "Oh, you're done, and we're wiping our hands of you, and good
Right.
luck, and see how things go from there." It You keep up with the person and make sure, if, I don't know, things start to go sideways, they have that support network there,
Yep,
right?
come on back,
Yeah,
I
exactly.
mean, when you graduate our program, there's 2 things I hope. One is I hope I never see you in the program again, and 2, I hope that if you need it, I do see you again, and that's
Right,
fine. There's no shame in that, right? I mean, I've been to rehab more than once, like, sometimes we don't get it the first time, and so, we need that open door that we know is gonna be welcoming if things go sideways. We never wanna plan on it, but we don't need to fall into that shame spiral of, well, I've screwed up now, so screw it. I might as well go all in. Well, you might not come back.
right, right, and knowing that that door is still open, that it's not being shut on you. Again, like you were saying before, there are people who are going through this. You know that you have that support. You know that you have other people there who have uh, walked the path that you've walked, and they know what you're going through, and so, like, that's a door that you're going to be more likely to want to go back through. That those people are understanding of what it is that you have going on, so
Yeah.
that's
And I,
great. Yeah.
I look at, addiction and mental health, especially addiction is, I look at it as a chronic disease,
Hmm.
right? This is not an acute thing where we go in, we clean the wound, we do surgery, we stitch you up and you're healed, right? It is something that can go into remission, right? Like cancer, it can go into remission. We can get treated, it goes into remission, um, but it can come back.
Sure.
And thankfully, there are things that we can do, as people who struggle with drugs, alcohol, mental health, there are things that we can do to keep that in remission,
Hmm.
right? We do our maintenance, we do our work, we go to AA meetings, we go to smart recovery meetings, we go to alumni events, we stay engaged. And that's why we provide that, so that people have that resource. But to think that this is a quick fix and you go off to some sunny rehab in California and then you're healed, like it just doesn't work that way.
Right.
And, frankly, I'm glad it doesn't because, the work that I have to do on myself to stay sober also makes me a better person, right? It does. And so, when I'm not doing it, I'm at risk. And when I am doing it, not only am I not at risk, but I'm actually like, better human.
Yeah, and because you're kind of taking a approach where you're looking at the overall big picture of you and your life and what you need, and you mentioned earlier the mindfulness and the meditation, and that kind of helps keep you more focused on the present moment, which helps not only you in terms of your recovery and your any issues that you might be going through, but also helps you with your personal relationships and business relationships and other things like that, because you're here, you're present, you're not, your mind isn't 2 weeks away where you're worrying about that deadline or that thing that you need to do, or whatever. You're here, and you can be focused on what's going on with the people who are around you right now, right?
Yeah. Well, and you think back to that. I don't know. I know it was Abraham Lincoln or somebody. The internet attributes it to. It's like if you're cutting down a tree, I spend the first 2/3 of the time sharpening the axe, right?
Right.
We think about our lives and, alcoholics and addicts do that all the time because we're going to meetings and we're working on ourselves. But most people, they don't spend an hour or 2 hours a day sharpening the axe, right? Working on themselves. They go to work, they do the thing, they come back, they hang out with family, they do, they might have a hobby, but they're not investing in themselves. And so, I look at it as, it's a hard road to get to the blessing, but it's a blessing that I'm kind of forced to do that. Because without being forced, I probably wouldn't do it. Nobody does.
Right.
But I'm forced to work on myself. with otherwise I have disastrous consequences. So it's good for me.
So there might be some folks out there who are maybe a little bit hesitant to go through a program like the one that you have to offer.
Mhm.
What are some of um, the things that might hold somebody back, like keep them from wanting to get in there? And then, like, what do you say to these people to kind of help them overcome that to actually get through and go through these programs?
Yeah, I think the biggest objection that people have, especially military folks, and I assume most of your listeners are associated with the military.
Yeah,
So, the biggest objection I think I hear from, well, I don't hear it because these people don't talk to us,
sure.
but the biggest objection I think we have as a group is this cultural tough it out mentality,
Mhm.
right? I mean, I remember being on runs like battalion runs, company runs, or whatever, or even just the APFT or whatever, and you're on this run and you're doing this thing and you have like a lingering sprained ankle or whatever. And the answer is you just tough it out. You just run on it. You don't fall out of formation. You go. Right. Which, there's benefits to that in a PT run in the army. And if I'm 24 years old and I hurt my ankle a little more, it'll heal fast. Right. Unfortunately, that same mentality when transferred to mental health doesn't work.
Right.
We can't tough it out, and there's a stigma that, if you get shot in combat and you're hurt, nobody calls you weak, right?
Right.
Nobody calls you weak for getting shot, right?
Right.
But for whatever reason, if my mental health is hurt or if I'm struggling with drugs or alcohol, I feel like I'm weak if I say something, if I admit it. I feel
Mhm.
like I feel like I should be stronger. Well, like, look, the reality is you're here, and I always say to folks, if you would you ever run away from an enemy in combat? And they're like, no, I've never. Okay, well, right now your enemy is your depression, your anxiety, your drugs, and your alcohol. And like, why are you running away now? And so we've got to face it. We got to do it. And the courageous thing is not to run from it. It's not to hide it, right? Hiding and running, those don't sound like courageous terms for military folks, right? And so the courageous thing is to say, hey, look, I've got an issue. I'm gonna like charge through the objective. I'm gonna go do whatever I have to do to fix it because that's who I am,
Yeah,
right? I'm a guy who takes care of my family and myself, and like I'm gonna go do that. And the other thing I'd say to people is that, as you try to tough this out, like as soon as you start asking yourself if you have a problem, or as soon as someone else thinks you might, you probably do. You're probably pretty far in.
sure.
And so, you know, the earlier you get it fixed, the easier it's gonna be to get out of it, right? The earlier you start to address it and go to a program or start going to AA or whatever, the easier it's gonna be to get out of it. Because this is a progressive disease. If left to its own, it doesn't get better. And the bad part is it doesn't stay the same either. It gets worse, right? It's progressive. And
Mhm.
so, our body, it's the way the neuro, we don't need to get into the neuroscience, but like that's the way our brains are wired with this disease. And so the longer we let it go, the deeper we're going to be in and the harder it's going to be to get out. So I just tell people, look, if you feel like you have a problem, let's come and get it, let's take care of business and then let's move forward, right? And you're gonna have
Right.
a hard time moving forward without that.
Yeah, and, to your point, there are a whole host of professionals that we go to see on a daily basis almost, where we go to a mechanic to get our car fixed, and it's not like we're, weak or incompetent or
Right.
anything, 'cause, we go and do that, or we go to get our hair cut at a barbershop because we don't want our hair to look stupid by cutting ourselves. We go and we find other professionals to do things. We have accountants to do our taxes. We have uh
Right.
you know I can go on and on with all these different professions that are out there that help us in ways that we are lacking. Not everyone's going to be an accountant. Not everyone's going to be able to understand the tax code and do all those things. You're not an idiot because you can't do that. Like, you just have other
Right.
things you need to occupy your time with, and so you're not supposed to be an expert in that. That's why there are experts. Otherwise, they'd just be regular people who just know things that everyone else knows. So if you're having a problem with mental health or addiction or anything like that, there are experts out there who can
Yeah.
help you deal with that. Um, it's really no different if you think about it that way. You go to a doctor, bring it back to medical terms. You break your
Mhm.
leg and you go to the doctor to get it healed. Like, You're not weak because you went to the doctor, like, it was broken. You get it fixed. Otherwise
Exactly, exactly, and it's the same thing. I mean,
yeah,
and I know not everybody sees it that way, but it doesn't really matter how everybody sees it, right? And I think people are, as a whole, starting to understand more and more. Coming out of COVID, I think there were a lot of people that struggled with depression that had never done it before, and
yeah,
there were a lot of people that were struggling with drinking too much that had never done it before. And so, a large portion of the society, at least, is starting to understand a little bit, like, oh, I see how that can get somebody because
yeah,
it never gotten me before. Now I experienced a little bit of it, and like I understand. So, like, the stigma is becoming less and less. I think the biggest stigma is the one we put on ourselves.
mhm,
We would never judge a friend for doing that. Like,
sure.
if one of our buddies was that it was like, hey, you know what? I felt like I was drinking a little too much. Wasn't really good for me. I went and got it squared away, and now I'm like, living my best life, and I'm healthier. My relationships better. We wouldn't be like, oh man, you were so weak.
Right.
We feel like, oh, it's great for you.
Yeah,
Maybe if you still drink with him, you might be like, oh man, I lost my drinking buddy. But at the same time, you'd be like, wow, I'm proud of this guy for taking care of business.
and that's also like, I try to instill this type of attitude in my kids when I talk to them, not talking about drinking buddies, obviously, but, uh, but, um, if you have a friend and the friend has a problem, and what do you do? Do you help them with the problem? Do you make fun of them because of the problem? Do you ignore them because of the problem? How do you react to this type of person? And so I told my kids, like, if you're in a situation and you have a problem, something's wrong, and your friends, quote friends, just abandon you, are they really friends? Are they
Right?
really those people that you wanna have around you, in your life? Because life will get hard. I mean, I know they're just kids right now, and, you know, the toughest thing that they probably have to deal with is maybe a flat tire on their bike, but, still,
Yeah.
if their friends abandon them for that, like, what happens if stuff gets really tough? Like,
Oh,
they're gonna be with nobody, and so pay attention to those little cues of, how what is the character of these people, and how can they help, um, support you in these types of things. And you
yeah.
were
And I
talking
think,
about oh, go ahead.
yeah, I think taking that one step further, you know, it. How do we treat our friends when they're going through a problem,
Yeah.
and then how do we treat ourselves when we're going through a problem too? Right? What are the things that I say to myself? Because you know, if I wouldn't say this to a friend who was struggling with it, I shouldn't be saying it to myself.
Mhm. Mhm. Absolutely. Um, Now on the topic of friends and even family, you mentioned before sometimes people are coming from a terrible family situation or home situation, whatever their situation is, going into uh, a treatment center like yours. Um, how can family members and friends support someone who is in the midst of recovery and trying to figure this all out? What can they do? Or maybe a different way to ask the same question is, what shouldn't they do? What are things
Yeah,
that they should
yeah,
avoid too? Maybe both sides.
sure. Yeah, I was gonna go into that anyway. So we hear this term enabling a lot, right? And so what is enabling? I look at enabling as protecting someone from the natural consequences of their unhealthy behavior.
Sure.
So if somebody is, getting drunk all the time and we're like cleaning up their messes, literally or figuratively, that's enabling, right? If we're giving them money because they're blowing their money on drugs and alcohol, that's enabling, right? The opposite of it, not an opposite, but another term that's kind of a different thing is supporting, right? So supporting someone in the action of their healthy behavior, right? It's a reinforcing mechanism, right?
Mhm.
So if someone's kind of lost in this cycle of mental health and drugs and alcohol, and they can't keep a job down and we're paying their rent every month, that's enabling, right? If someone says, hey, I want to get clean and sober, I'm trying to go to treatment, will you help me with that cost? To me, that's supporting, right? Because I'm not supporting the bad behavior. What I'm doing is I'm encouraging the new behavior. And I'm not saying that you have to pay for it, right? But what I'm saying is you start to encourage that.
Yeah.
Someone needs a ride to treatment, you take them to treatment, right? You're not taking them to the bar, but you're taking them to treatment. Um, you know, it's and then the other piece of that is once someone starts to go down the right path, it's our work as family and friends to do our best to start to let go of some of the resentment.
Mhm.
Because addiction is a family disease. And for a lot of years, we've been, our family members, I should say my family members, are the ones that took the brunt of it, right? They're the ones that are not. And so it's a lot of years. And now now you go to treatment and you're starting to get well. And what you want is a pat on the back and like an attaboy, right? Well, they've just had 10 years of pain. So like they're not about to give me an attaboy,
Right.
right? On the other hand, I need it. And so it's this fine line of like, yes, you don't have to forget what happened. Also, let's try to do our best to support the moved in the positive direction because we want them to continue, right? If someone starts down the right path and I start beating them up, likely they're not going to keep going down the right path, which is what I ideally want as a family or friend, right?
Mhm.
And so it's very tough and it requires kind of doing our own work, right? There are meetings like Al-Anon, which is, people that support people in, in AA or in active addiction or recovery, smart recovery friends and family, doing your own therapy, right? Starting to come to terms with some of that stuff. And it doesn't mean your feelings aren't valid. Doesn't mean the anger is not valid. But what actions are we going to take now that they're moving in the right direction? Well, like we want to be as supportive as we can. It's not zero defect. It never will be. But that's really what I say is like focus on supporting and then doing our best to try to not let those past resentments tear the person down once they start doing well.
Right, and I think of it like, what is gonna be helpful now? If I'm holding on to this resentment and I'm just angry and bitter and everything, I'm not going to give them the pat on the back when they have gone through and they've completed recovery or anything like that. I'm not going to be supportive of them. I'm going to be, knocking them down, or I'm going to be, taking my anger and frustration out on them. Um, how is that helpful? Who
Right.
is that? And is it even helping you as a person to express things that way? Maybe you feel the anger and the resentment and the whatever, but is it helpful to put it that way? So you kind of have to do a little self work on some work on yourself
Sure.
and figure out like how do I make the best of the situation? Like what happened
Yeah.
happened. I can't change
Yeah.
that. How do I make the best of this going forward? And there may not be a great answer uh, to that question, right? If the person's going into recovery, but you know that they're still going to the bar too, and they're
Right.
still they're they're
Yeah.
not really, they say they're doing one thing, but they're not really doing it, that
Mhm.
type of thing. Um, there may not be a great answer to how do you solve this. You might have to figure that
And I
out.
will say I will say that having boundaries around those things,
Yeah,
is 100% valid and encouraged, right? Like, it's fine to say to someone like, you know, "I appreciate the path you're on. I see the progress. Um, I want you to know that if you go back to that lifestyle, I can no longer support this.
yeah,
I can no longer be in this." That's okay. Like,
yeah,
nothing wrong with that, right? And there's nothing wrong with walking away, if that's what you need to do. But like staying in it and then also being super destructive, that's not good for you and it's not good for them.
exactly. Yeah, so when you recognize that, you have to kinda just make those decisions based on, and everyone is gonna be different in their, kind of decision-making process, but yeah, if it's destroying your life too, then you're gonna have to find a way around that somehow, and like you said, sometimes that is walking away, but, it's tough, I think, no matter, there's no easy answers here, and like
Absolutely.
uh,
Addiction wasn't easy and the recovery process isn't easy either, right? On
exactly,
you, on the family member, and that's something for the people who are, going into recovery to know as well. So it's not just an understanding by the family member, but it's also an understanding by, the person who's in recovery, the addict or alcoholic that's coming, you also have to understand. So this is what we talk about when we do family sessions is, on one hand, here's what the family here's their education. On the other hand, to the person who's in recovery, it's like, look, don't expect the light switch to be turned on overnight.
Yeah.
Like, you've done a lot of damage, brother, sister. Like, you've done a lot, you know? And that's not, it's trauma and it's hurt them. And they're going to hold some of that. They're going to hold a lot of that. And they're going to try to do their best to drop those resentments. At the same time, you also have to understand that they're going to be there a little bit.
Mhm.
And so you have to be understanding and you have to know that just because you're on the right path now for 60 days doesn't negate that you've done a lot of damage for 5 years. So you have to be understanding that this, as we say in AA, time takes time.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, it might take them a little bit to come around. So like,
Sure.
it's kind of a meet in the middle on both sides.
Yeah, and that's, I think, a good way to look at it. Trying to find some common ground and meet in the middle, is, maybe sometimes the best you can do, right? And uh, just understand, yeah, that those those people are dealing with their own things. And I talked to another guest on a different episode about, like, secondary PTSD. So basically, like, and I'm not sure if that's exactly the term that we were using, but basically, like, someone who has PTSD, they have their triggers and the things that affect them, and then that affects other people in their lives, or their
For
families,
sure.
and other people. And so that's like a whole separate issue that now you have to deal
Yeah.
with. Well, the addiction is very similar, where now that has affected other people, and now they have their issues that they have to deal with because
Right.
of that. And so now we have to kind of focus on the whole family as a unit, or other people who are affected as well. But if I, focus on all those people, and try to figure out, how do we make this right, and how do we move forward, and how do we, uh, you know, have a better future. Like you said, time takes time, and it might not be comfortable for a little while, but, if you guys are both parties are working, um, towards a better future, then I think there's some hope there, right?
For sure.
Yeah. Um, Yeah, I love hearing all this, and I know you guys are in Florida, and so for folks who might not be in, your geographic area, um, are there ways that they can get involved with what you guys are doing, or do you have other, places around the country that you kinda work with that can help, with those folks who may not be geographically close, or are there things that they can look for in places, in their area?
Yeah, it's for sure. So right now we're in Florida. We're in Tampa and Jacksonville. We'll probably open another location in the next year. We'll also be opening up a virtual program in Florida.
Oh, great.
Currently still only for Florida residents, but we're looking to expand. But I think when people are looking for a place, what I would say, the first place that I go to is Google reviews. Right. I mean, it's sure you can have fake reviews and stuff, but the real reviews also get through there, right?
Yeah.
Start to read what other people's experience is at a treatment center. And, when someone writes a review for a treatment center, it's a very vulnerable thing to do. You can change your name on, you can sign up for a new Gmail account or whatever, so you don't have to give your name. But even that's a high bar,
Mhm.
right? It's hard enough to go do a review for a restaurant you like or whatever. But if you're willing to like create another account or put your name out there, it says something about the place and read
Sure.
about what their experience has been like. I think that's really important. One thing, and it's super tactical, but I tell people to get like their health insurance buttoned up, right? So if they have TRICARE, that's great. If they've got the VA, the VA can sometimes do referrals too. But if they don't have either one, or for whatever reason, go out and get an insurance policy for a couple months, or a few months. Like there's brokers out there, and if you don't have any money, if you're not making any money, then the exchange programs are cheap. And what that does is now you have access to all of them, right? And so your sample set from like what you can choose from goes from this to this, and now you have more options. So I think Google reviews is a great place to look. Go visit the place in person. So schedule an assessment, and the assessment, a good assessment shouldn't be one way. They're not just assessing you for your viability at their treatment center and trying to sell you to come there, right? Some feel like that, right? If it feels like
Mhm.
that, leave. right? But what it should be is it should be a mutual conversation of like, I'm trying to decide, you're trying to decide if I'm fit for care here. I'm trying to decide if this is the right place for me to get well, if this is a supportive environment, if this is, if this looks and feels nice, if the clinicians seem like they have, their stuff together.
Right.
I look at group size, I look at um, the credentials of the clinicians, are they master's level or above? There's a bunch of stuff to look for, but I think I'd start with Google reviews and follow up with an in-person visit. And if it's not, a good treatment center, if they're not right for you, they'll find you somewhere else.
Mhm. Yeah, and, um, yeah, I'm sure there's other options too. So if you get to one, and I say this even with, so if you get to one medical treatment or mental a provider and doesn't feel like it's a good fit, well, go find another one because
No.
you don't want to stick in that bad relationship, if you will, and just stick with it just because that was the first one that you went to. There are others that you can check out, right? And we want to make sure that it's the right fit so that it actually works for you. Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, I tell, if a client's not happy with us, I'd be more than happy to find them another a better place that works for them.
Yeah.
No loss to me. The other thing I would say to people to do is go to any AA meeting and like raise your hand to share and say, Nick, alcoholic, I'm struggling. I'm trying all the things. I think I need treatment. If anybody knows of a really good place, I'd love to talk to you after the meeting.
Yeah.
And you'll have 4 people come up to you.
Right. And that's another great way too is because those reviews will be uh, you know for sure honest
Sure.
reviews of that because those people who are there they know what you're going through and they want to help and
Mhm.
so that's another great way to look at it. um for folks who are interested in the Florida area, who want to get involved with Sophros recovery, um, how do they reach out? Where can they go to find out more information about what you are, schedule an assessment, that type of thing?
Yeah, so just www.sophrosrecovery.com. It's Sophros recovery.com. Our Tampa site is just Sophros Recovery Tampa, but you can go from one to the other. And there's a phone number on there. Just call and tell them you want to come in and see the place and get to know us, and we're happy to help. So, and again, if you're like, say for example, so we don't do detox, which is like medical detox or residential treatment. So if you need that, say, hey, look, here's what I think I might need more. I don't feel like I can stop drinking on my own even for a day. Okay, fine. We'll find you a place. Like,
Mhm.
happy to help.
Excellent, excellent. Well, it's great that uh, that the resources are there, and that even if this is not the right fit for those people, they need more than you can offer, or whatever the case may be. You Sometimes the hardest thing to do is just picking up that phone and making that first phone
Right.
call. I
For
know for
sure.
myself, when I got back from Afghanistan, like you were saying before, I tried to muscle through it, and um, that didn't work, and I had to pick up the phone and make a call to get some help, and that was like one of the scariest phone calls I've ever made.
So hard. So hard.
So, knowing that, regardless of, whether or not this is the right place, you're gonna help, at least point them in the right direction and find, the treatment that will be, right for them, and that right there just makes you feel like, "Okay, there's somebody on my side. Somebody gives a
Yeah.
crap about what happens to me," and
Only
that's
have to pick up that heavy phone one time, right? You don't have to do
exactly,
it once.
exactly. And then somebody else is there to help carry that load, I guess, if you want to put it that way.
Exactly.
So, before we wrap up this episode, I always like to do a segment whenever I have another veteran on the show. I call it "Is It Service Connected?" And it's where we get to take a quick look at a funny video, kind of America's Funniest Home Video style of service members doing kind of things that probably are going to get them a service connected disability somewhere down the line because they're doing stupid stuff or whatever. And it's usually a fun time to watch a video. And so I'm going to share my screen with you real quick and share this video for the audio only listeners. I'm going to try to describe what we're looking at here right now. We're looking at, looks like it's the back of a plane, maybe helicopter, looking down at the ground. It's kind of blurry. It's not the best video right now, but I'm going to hit play here in just a second. We're going to see kind of what happens here. So here we go. So, yep, definitely guys jumping out the back, parachute deploying, and this guy's parachute did not deploy. Oh crap! And he
Oh,
is
no.
heading down, and he
Oh,
pulled the
there he is.
reserve. There he is. He's good to go. But we're looking at the faces of everybody else in the in the back of the plane, and they are scared shitless.
Oh my
They do not
god.
want to. They do not want to jump out of this plane at all.
That's
And
great.
so that I think that is the kind of the funny part there is the reaction to everybody else who's like, "Holy crap, what just happened? Is that going to happen to me? Who packed my chute?" Um,
Yeah, hopefully not the same guy as that one before him. I mean,
yeah,
I can imagine some NCO trying to get you to jump out of an airplane at that point. I imagine, Specialist Johnson giving a real hard pass on that one.
yeah, or either that or he's got some serious balls to be able to jump out of that plane. At that point, uh, but it's yeah that I always said if I'm in a perfectly good airplane with a perfectly good parachute, I'm gonna land in a perfectly good airplane with a perfectly good parachute. You can send airborne, to go do that type of stuff. I am not joining them. That is
Yep.
for the birds. I always hated heights anyway. So like looking out the back of an airplane, I would have just been frozen. They literally would have had to push me and get me out the door that way. Like there's no other way I'm getting near the edge. So anyways, Nick, thank you so much for taking the time to join us, sharing what you do uh, with with the folks who are coming through to get the treatment, and being vulnerable and sharing your side of the story too, and sharing how you went through a very similar process on your own. So, thank you again, and I'm glad that there's folks out there like you who are doing this type of work.
Thanks, Scott. Enjoyed it.
Thanks for listening to the Drive On podcast. If you want to support the show, please check out Scott's book, Surviving Son, on Amazon. All of the sales from that book go directly back into this podcast and work to help veterans in need. You can also follow the Drive On podcast on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, and wherever you listen to podcasts.